Hi, this is Simon Upstall and welcome to another tutorial for Apple Motion, and today I want to walk you through this little demo that I did of a Star Wars hyperspeed space jump something or other vortex thing. No idea what the correct technical terms are. I'm sure you will correct me. Anyway, so what I'm going to do in this tutorial is not give you a step-by-step guide to how to build it, but instead I'm going to walk you through my completed project layer by layer, and hopefully that will be enough to get you going. So let's take a look. So for the project settings, I went with 1920 1080, 30 frames a second, and a duration of 3 seconds. So let's break this down step by step. So that I'm just going to turn off this action group here and show you what I've done here. So I've got a background color, which is obviously the background color of the sky, which will gradually increase in brightness as we hit the sort of hyper jump, whatever the thing is, moment. And I did that simply by keyframing the background color solid. On top of that, I've just added a widescreen mask. Now this is what I quite like to do with the widescreen mask. There is a filter, but it starts to get a bit messy. So to create a widescreen mask, you basically make a black color solid like this, black color solid. And what I've done is made another color solid, and I've made this 1920 by 858. So my project was 1920 1080. 1920 by 858 is a scope frame, and I'm using that as the image mask for my black solid. So if I turn that on and off, you can see that we're masking everything with that. And obviously I needed to invert the mask to get that effect. So that's the easy stuff. Let's turn back on the action group and look through what we've got here. I'm going to turn everything off actually. Let's turn off this. Basically I've got a star field here, and what I made that from was a very basic emitter. So it looks like this, a 3D box emitter, something I just had in my library. Random fill, it's about sort of like 4,000 by whatever, 4,000 by 4,000 by 2,000. And it hasn't got a birth rate, it's just got a fixed initial number of stars. What I also did was a little bit of colorize over life, so they actually get brighter like that. Let's just turn off these other filters so you can see that, so the stars get brighter like that. And I'm also going to turn off that earthquake thing, which was giving us this judder. Actually, we're getting a little bit of a parallax there, and the reason for that is that I was actually taking this stars group and animating its scale so as we kind of go to the jump. And you can see that gives us quite a nice parallax, because actually I've got a 3D particle emitter. So to do the kind of jump thing, we obviously just used a basic zoom blur. So that's the zoom blur on its own, but it's not quite what we want. So what I did was I added a levels, so turn that on, and I came into the alpha and I really crunched down the whites like that, as you can see. So without that, it looks like that, pretty anemic. But if we do that, we get this really nice, intense look to it. And obviously, I came in and I did all sorts of keyframing of that. So we gradually sort of ramp into it. Lots of keyframing of all sorts of things going on here. Did I keyframe that levels? No, I didn't. That's probably the only thing I didn't keyframe. What I also did was I added this neon filter, which I did keyframe. Let's have a look at that. Just quite a basic keyframe that. So that really helps with that kind of burnout effect like that. So as we're going through like that, I mean, just increasing the mix value of that neon from 50% all the way up to 100%. So I think that was quite a good call. So that's my stars, and for my vortex here, I just did something very simple. I'm sure one could do something much more complicated. I basically grabbed a simple clouds generator, and I had two colors here, so white and this color, which I actually picked off the Star Wars clip. I added a 12 filter to that to give it that kind of vortex feel. What I probably should have done was, oh no, actually I did do that. I centered up the vortex in the middle of the scene like that, in the middle of that sort of cockpit window. So that was quite important there. Oh, and also coming back to my stars, I centered the zoom blur well, I tried to center the zoom blur. I should have done it a bit more accurately. Center the zoom blur in the window as well, like that. Because at the default, it's sort of off over here. That's not going to work. We need to be sort of centered. We need to be flying directly into it like that. Okay, so coming back to my clouds, I also just faded them in quickly at this point here. So a transition between my stars and the vortex. And I also gave my clouds generator a bit of a rotation here. So I added a ramp to that, 30 degrees over the course of its life. So that was the vortex, and those are the stars. So all that's pretty straightforward. So then I have got here this foreground layer. Basically, I just took this from the Star Wars clip and just matted it out. And I also added to it, as you will see here, a levels. What was I doing there with the levels? So at the beginning, we wanted it could be kind of nice and dark, but we wanted it to be kind of much brighter as we hit the center of the jump there. So I keyframed the white in value to do that. And I also actually darkened it down with that white out value at the start. So at the start, it was like that because I'd taken a bright frame and I actually wanted it to be darker. So again, that sort of just helps, you know, very intense light feeling that we're getting there. So then I did a little bit of light wrap. This is quite complicated and I won't really go into explaining that. But the light wrap, you can see it's wrapping around the characters. Again, that helps that feeling of the light being really intense. So, you know, my cutout is pretty rubbish, I have to admit, but, you know, we could have spent a lot more time on that. Probably should have done. I actually ended up doing a little bit of shrink on it. I probably should have done a bit of feather as well, just to soften it off, but hey, this was just a demo, so I wasn't going to get carried away. So I also added in a color solid over the top. So you can see we've got this kind of nice fogging that happens. And that's just basically a color solid, white color solid. And you can see it's being keyframed in to around sort of 25% opacity at that transition point there. That really helps as well with that transition into the vortex. And finally, I just added an earthquake, and this really brings the whole thing together because obviously, you know, this vast energy is hitting the ship, and, you know, it also just really masks a whole load of things as we're going through that transition as well, but also just kind of adds a great deal of dynamism. And also what I did with that earthquake was to keyframe its twist and its horizontal and vertical shake. So obviously we don't want any right at the beginning, and then we want to make it sort of maximum intensity in the middle, and then just reduce it a little bit towards the end. So that really is it. I don't think I really want to have built that while you were watching because it's just too time consuming. But hopefully I've given you enough hints and tips as to how you can make it yourself. I might do a tutorial on light wrap if anybody's interested in that. So thanks for watching. See you again soon.